Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Here talking 2024 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers all the time. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Thank you for joining us. Those joining us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've got a huge show planned for you tonight. And don't worry, you will not just be me for the next hour plus. It will be myself. We've got Justin Lorber, a.k.a. Future Dodgers, who will be hopping on with us momentarily. We've got Anthony Witrado, who will be here in just a little while as well, talking all sorts of stuff. Tons of good content. I do want to give a quick shout out to some folks over at BigTimeBats.com. BigTimeBats.com. You can see the newest addition to my my backdrop, if you will. I mentioned these. They've got all sorts of World Series commemorative bats, and they are awesome. This is the 2-bat set of the black ones. The one closest to me has a engraved signature of every player that was on the World Series roster. The one next to it has the scores from all of the World Series games themselves. So BigTimeBats.com, where you can check that out as well. So planned for tonight, Justin Lorber is going to be here in just a second, popping on. We're going to talk Rule 5 draft, a really surprising, I would say, decision. I think most people would say decision by a series of decisions by the Dodgers. Then Anthony's going to hop on. We're going to talk Dave Roberts, where he finished in Manager of the Year. We're going to talk Teoscar Hernández, Juan Soto. We'll talk a little bit about Mookie Betts pod as well as some Hall of Fame stuff. But without further ado, let's get to our special guest for tonight, Justin Lorber, a.k.a. Future Dodgers. On short notice, Justin, I appreciate you being willing to hop on, talk Rule 5 draft with us. I haven't gotten a chance to talk to you since the World Series, so I'll give you a moment to share any stories, any special moments for you as it relates to the 2024 World Series.
You're putting me on the spot there. I don't know. It was fun.
How did it feel for you compared to 2020? That's the best question I like to ask people. Because I tell people 2020 was my first. I listened to none of the nonsense about it not mattering, but there are a lot of people, and I totally understand, who have sort of a special feeling towards this 2024 team and the experience.
No, honestly, it is a lot different. I think 2020 was such a sense of like relief. Like I agree. I think that most, if not all, of the points people made to try to detract from that championship are they just don't have a lot of merit to them. That one really felt like a lot of relief. This one was, I think, it was different in that I felt like I could appreciate it more in the moment. Like, Game 1 is happening, and they're down in the 8th inning, they tie, and it's like, even if they lose, this is a classic game.
Yeah,
this, like, I could take a step back in the moment and just be like, they might lose this game, they might lose this series. This is a classic World Series game. This is going to be an all-timer. That was before the walk-off home run happened. So I think that's a lot different. Whereas in 2020, it was just like, oh my God, they're gonna lose this game. Like, how is this happening again? So I think that to be able to enjoy that stuff in the moment, it helped that for at least most of the last two series, they were playing with a lead, a lead in the game, usually a lead in the series, almost always, which helps in terms of like
the enjoyment level,
general anxiety.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, well, let's talk. Today was the deadline for all teams across Major League Baseball to protect players from the Rule 5 draft. We don't need to get into the specifics. We've done that on previous shows about what the Rule 5 draft is, who was eligible. The Dodgers, as 3 o'clock came and went, it seemed like for a moment maybe they hadn't protected anybody. In classic Dodgers fashion, theirs just was like the last one announced. They added a relief pitcher, Jack Dreyer, to the 40-man roster. And this feels like it was a surprise. I mean, you're, of course, one of the places that I go. I think you had him 5th on your list of guys you thought the Dodgers might protect. You listed him at like in the 20% category. Bruce, who we've had on the show, had him 4th on his list. And yet this is the guy the Dodgers choose. So we'll get to in a second Austin Gauthier and the guys that they chose not to protect. Give me your reaction to hearing that Jack Dreyer was the one player that the Dodgers chose to protect.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I didn't place him as like the most likely person, but this is kind of a weird year where all the guys who would have been locked or something close to locks were already added mid-season. River Ryan, Justin Robleski, Ben Kasparius, Eduardo Henriquez, the latter two being guys who maybe at the start of the year, weren't locked or likely additions, but as we got into the second half of the season, clearly looked like that.
Yeah.
Those guys were all added mid-season. So you go into the Rule 5 draft where, unlike a lot of previous years where, either there's a top prospect or there's, someone who's like a clear, near major league contributor, like this guy's definitely got to be added, wasn't really the case this year. So I didn't expect them to make, 3 or 4 or 5 additions. But honestly, no one name would have really shocked me, just because it looked like they had maybe 1 or 2 spots, and there wasn't anyone who stood out as like a must protect. And as for Dreyer, I think, you look at the major league bullpen where you have Alex Vesia, you have Anthony Banda as your 2 lefties, and behind that, not really any lefty relief options. So you get him on the 40-man as a potential third lefty relief option behind those 2, and might see some time in the majors next year.
Yeah. Dreyer, an undrafted free agent in 2021 out of Iowa, left-handed pitcher you mentioned, 32% strikeout rate, AA and AAA last year, an ERA of 2.2. When I read the profile, Justin, you mentioned Alex Vesia as one of the only 2 lefties they have on at the major league level, at least. Dreyer's profile seems to scream Alex Vesia, like they're hoping that this is a guy who turns into it. I say that because it's a fastball that sits 93, which is obviously not a very big number, but relies on induced vertical break about 18 inches. Vesia is like 20 plus inches. One of the guys they signed to a minor league contract is right around 18, 19 as well. So clearly this is a profile the Dodgers like. So when I read that, to me, it makes a little bit more sense how this guy goes from undrafted in 2021 to protected from the Rule 5 draft in 2024.
Yeah, really a meteoric rise. A guy who coming into the year hadn't pitched above high A. He starts out at AA, 14 scoreless innings, moves up to AAA, and continues with an ERA under 3 in a very offensive friendly environment. That's not necessarily easy to do. More strikeouts than innings pitched, and like you said, not necessarily big velocity. The vertical break on the fastball is going to be above average. It's not Vesia quality where, or maybe like a guy like Tanner Scott, where guys just can't see it.
Yeah.
And it's like the invisible fastball, regardless of velocity. But it's 18 inches is still above average for a major league fastball, a 4-seam fastball for IVB. So that's the primary pitch. He also has a slider, kind of a gyro slider that he throws, mixes in a curveball and sinker as well. But yeah, I think you're looking at him potentially similar. So I'm thinking about when the Dodgers first got Vesia, and I think at that point he was sitting, even like lower 90s, maybe like 91, 92. And I had written or said to someone at the time, like, if he gets a little bit of a velo bump up to 93, 94, this is going to be a quality major league bullpen arm. And this is and he did get that velo bump, and he has been since. I think you're looking at a guy like Dreyer, who, with what he has now, could be a major league contributor already, but any velo bump, and I think, you kick that up a notch.
Let's talk about the guys they chose not to protect. There's a couple guys on this list, a guy like Ryan Ward, who I think it's pretty easy for me to understand why he wasn't protected. Ryan Ward is a guy who's a little bit older on prospect side, has produced, has hit for power at AAA, but he kind of seems like the type of player who might be a quad A player, or at the very least, we've seen guys, and you might have been the one, somebody compared him to like a Ryan Noda, but one of these guys that just, this sounds very pretentious to say, but it's probably accurate. Like he will make it on a team that is not named to the Dodgers, but from the Dodgers perspective, he didn't feel like there was a pathway forward. The guy that most people had at the top of their list was Austin Gauthier, another guy who's kind of had a meteoric rise, similar to Jack Dreyer. The difference is he had unbelievable success all the way up until AAA. And then he hit AAA this past year and really struggled in what should have been a hitter's park Instead, the power went down, the OPS went down. So he's a multi-position player, high on-base percentage type guy, and yet he struggles. Do you think it's as simple as the Dodgers maybe believe that he's not going to be picked because of those struggles in AAA, or do you think that maybe they feel like he's hit his ceiling?
I mean, any roster decision when it comes to the Rule 5 draft, you're weighing risk versus, but it's an exercise in risk tolerance.
Yeah.
We could add him to the 40-man roster. 20% chance he gets picked, 40% chance. Like, these are all things that they're weighing. I wouldn't say that he's hit his ceiling. Obviously he's struggled, and I think if he hadn't struggled, he would probably be on the 40-man roster.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, it can be a little simple at times. If he'd hit a AAA, he's probably on the 40-man roster, but still a guy who could make an impact next year, like you said. Plays multiple positions, can play all over the field. Even played a little bit of outfield in the last couple years. Getting his bat in some different spots defensively. So I can see him being added. At the same time, now you go into next season, and if you're looking at, we don't know exactly how the lineup will shake out, but if there's one or two offensive injuries, now you're looking at guys like Alex Freeland and Dalton Rushing, who are already at AAA. Those guys might get first call to come fill those spots, push Gauthier down, and then next year you have another set of Rule 5 guys who've got to be protected.
Yeah.
So it's not, the door is not closed. I wouldn't say it's closed at all. But yeah, I had him as like my top guy to be protected, but not like in past years where it's like, oh, this guy's a lock to be protected, or I really think he's going to be protected because if he doesn't, he's going to get picked. I don't know. I think Gauthier or one of the other guys, Ward, someone else the Dodgers didn't protect, could get taken in the Rule 5 draft, but there's no one that screams to me like, oh, like this guy's for sure getting taken.
Yeah, and to your point on risk tolerance, it's a great point for a couple of reasons. One, it's the risk of what are the odds they actually get chosen. Then there's the percentage of what are the odds that they actually stick with that team. Gus Varland famously was drafted away from the Dodgers a couple of years ago and did not stick, ends up getting sent back to the Dodgers. And so he ends up back in the 40-man and in the organization. So let me get you out of here on this question. You kind of just hinted at it. Not knowing, I mean, I'm not expecting you to be an expert on every roster across the league, but when you look at the list of guys, I mentioned Ryan Ward. He feels like a guy who could get picked because he's been in AAA long enough and he has put up numbers there that suggest that there's probably a number of teams that even if it's as a fourth outfielder, could very easily be a contributor on some of these rosters. Is there someone that you think might be more likely to be taken in this draft? Andre Lipsius, another guy that's in this group. Carlos Duran, another player. Is there somebody else that you think might be more likely than my pick of Ryan Ward to actually be taken in the Rule 5 draft?
I think Gauthier would be the most likely just because of the positional versatility, being able to play up the middle. He's an older prospect. I think he's 25. So yeah, like even if he's, not a premium offensive impact kind of player, you can count on quite a few hands the number of like defense first, middle infield utility bat types across the major leagues in the last few years. So he could be that guy, and he could still stick on a major league team, even if the offensive impact isn't there. So I would say Gauthier. Damon Keith, I'll bring him up as well. I think it would be a little unexpected because he hasn't played above AA yet. But the power speed combo, I could see that being enticing for a rebuilding team that wants to take a chance on someone who could be talented. And, it would be a jump having not played above AA. He was injured partially this year. But that would be another potential guy who I don't think we've mentioned yet.
Thank you. Awesome. And is it Jake Vogel? Am I right on that one? That's another guy who was a former top draft pick. Am I right that he's eligible, or am I crazy?
Let's see. So he would have been drafted. He was drafted the COVID year. So yeah, he'd be first time eligible this year.
And Cody Hosey's the other guy who I believe was either in the same draft or has already been for Rule 5 eligible and was not taken. Is that right?
Yeah. So he was 2019 draft. So this would be his I believe, third year eligible, because he would have had the same Rule 5 protection year as Michael Busch.
Okay.
So he's been eligible for a couple of years. Obviously, I had someone ask me a question on Twitter about him. Best season of his career so far. But yeah, I mean, I think it would be a little surprising to see him get taken.
Awesome. Well, that's Justin Lorber. You can check his stuff out at futuredodgers.com. If you head over to Future Dodgers on Twitter, he posted on Monday an entire list of the guys that were eligible for the Dodgers, either because of this 2024 or in previous years, and are still eligible for it. So you can check that out over on his Twitter page as well. Justin, we appreciate the time. Thanks for hopping on short notice, and we'll have you back on soon to talk prospects. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Really well.
Justin is going to slide out of here, and we are going to bring in the one and only Anthony Witrado to take his place to talk more Dodgers stuff. Anthony, my friend, good to see you. I don't know if you knew this. The Dodgers are still 2024 World Series champs.
I was not sure until I saw the jersey that you're wearing.
There you go. A gift from my friend. You may not be able to find these gray World Series jerseys at Fanatics or MLB.com, and we'll leave it at that. So excited to have it. It's an authentic looking jersey, though. How about that? Let's get into some of the news, Anthony, of today. Again, thank you to everybody joining us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Let's talk with some news that came out today, Anthony. And it's news that makes me frustrated. You and I have talked on this show about Dave Roberts and where he belongs in the Manager of the Year conversation. You and I were frustrated that he was not a top 3 finalist. You went as far as to say you thought he should have won the award. I said I think he should have finished second. Well, if you haven't seen the results, you may want to guard your eyes a little bit. He finished 7th, Anthony, 7th in voting. He got just 3 votes, all of them third place votes. So out of 30 votes, he was on only 3 ballots, all third place votes. Here are the guys ahead of him. Pat Murphy from the Brewers. Again, he wins. I'm fine with that. Mike Schilt of the Padres, Carlos Mendoza of the Mets, Torey Lovullo. That's the Diamondbacks manager. You heard that right. He finished 4th in this list. Rob Thompson of the Phillies. Wait, not done. Brian Snitker of the Braves. All finished ahead of Dave Roberts. Lovullo didn't even qualify for the postseason. The rest of these teams, I don't know what to say, Anthony, other than yes, Dave Roberts won the World Series. He's happier with that. This is still pathetic and a joke to me.
Yeah, I think that they need to. The Baseball Writers Association needs to do a much better job. It's long overdue of really defining the parameters of these awards.
Yeah.
Because what this one has basically become is a team with low expectations overperforming those expectations. And it doesn't really matter for the most part what happens during the season. It's just strictly final record and where you were expected to finish from when spring training was going. And so I think that it does a disservice to the award when you have a manager who went through the things with that roster that Dave Roberts did, and you're calling him a middle of the pack candidate and saying that basically what you're saying is probably anybody could have done what he did and led them to a major league best win total. And this team's so talented, a lot of guys might have been able to do that, right? But like to call him 7th in the National League, to me, is a joke. I think it does a disservice to the award. I'm fine with Pat Murphy winning. Yeah. I said how I felt about that before, given I think sometimes what this is too is that the writers are chasing justification for where they had somebody slotted when the season started. So if the Brewers didn't have great expectations and a handful of writers or different publications missed on them and did not properly evaluate how garbage that division was, then they make up for it by saying, well, that guy was the manager of the year. That's why we did not have them finishing as well as they did. And it took his performance in the dugout to get them over that hump. It wasn't us misevaluating things.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I just think of Schilt and Lovullo, these are guys that manage teams that went head-to-head with the Dodgers. At one point, all three of those teams were basically neck and neck in the divisional race. There was a lot of momentum, people believed, for a team other than the Dodgers to win it. And the Dodgers ran away with it. They end up beating the Diamondbacks by 9 games. The Padres, I believe it was by 5 games. They win those 2 games at the end of the season. Like, I'm just, and again, on the Padres side, I don't think it's crazy to say they had at least as much talent as the Dodgers did, and yet the Dodgers outperformed them down the stretch, right? Like, accounting for injuries, all of it. I know it's not a postseason award, but it just, again, I can't find somebody that will explain to me how the Braves manager did a better job, how the Diamondbacks manager did a better job than the Dodgers manager. Somebody pointed out to me, the Phillies guy. They're like, this guy brought back the entire team that was in the NLCS last year and underperformed and had a worse record than the Dodgers, and yet he finishes ahead of them. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't understand it, and I don't understand how the Padres manager
It's crazy.
Can finish where they finish, and he finishes second, and Dave Roberts finishes 7th.
Yeah,
that one's going to need some explaining to me, because coming in, a lot of people had the Padres pick to make the playoffs, and they did exactly what they were expected to do.
Yeah.
Not only that, there were a decent amount of people who, even with the Ohtani and the Glasnow signings, picked the Padres to beat the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm at a loss with this one. And it's not that I think that he absolutely was the runaway favorite to win this award, or should have been.
Right.
I'm fine that he didn't win it, but like, to say that for him to finish 7th, I think is it does a disservice to the award itself. Not you know what I mean? Like, if that makes sense, like,
you can't take it seriously.
Exactly. In basketball, if you're telling me that Jerry Jackson Jr. is the most is the defensive player of the year, but Anthony Davis can't finish in the top 3, it does a disservice to what that award actually means.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I feel the same way now about this one. It's been going downhill for a while, this particular award. But I think when you have somebody do what Dave Roberts did with that roster adversity that he was given, it's silly. And it's just, it needs to, the way the parameters are spelled out for the writers needs to be reevaluated.
I'm with you. Some more news from today. Not unexpected news, similar to the Rule 5 draft. The other deadline today was the qualifying offer deadline. Teoscar Hernández unsurprisingly declined the 1-year qualifying offer contract from the Dodgers. This is to be expected. It does not mean he will not be back as a Dodger. It only means that if he were to leave and sign elsewhere, the Dodgers, because of some luxury tax penalties, would receive a pick after the 4th round. So it wouldn't be as high as the 1st round because of some penalties the Dodgers have incurred, but it would be a pick in between the 4th and 5th round if Teoscar Hernández were to sign elsewhere. Coincidentally enough, today reports have it that the Dodgers officially met with Juan Soto. Fabian Ardaya pointed out, a league source to him confirmed that they would be meeting on Tuesday. That joins the Dodgers with the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Mets, and the Yankees to officially have met with Juan Soto and his agent, Scott Boras, in Southern California this week. These two stories are very much related because, as we've talked about on this show, regardless of how much you like the offensive profiles of both of these players, the defensive profiles would suggest that you can't put both of them in the same outfield at the same time. As much as we would like Teoscar Hernández back, I do think he even probably would acknowledge that his market is going to depend on what happens with Juan Soto. And all we know for now, Anthony, is that the Dodgers have officially had a meeting with Juan Soto as of today on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that you're right in linking those two together. I think that clearly Teoscar is a tier below, the caliber of player that Juan Soto is, at least offensively. But the Dodgers are doing their due diligence and meeting with him and, figuring out where they stand. And Teoscar Hernández is doing his, due diligence and saying, yes, I'm not going to take that qualifying offer because I'm looking at how this market's going to play out. And it's not necessarily that he would sign after Soto, but I think his signing is going to be in relation to Soto. So like if a team is told after the first round of meetings, you are out on Juan Soto, their next call is to Teoscar Hernández's agent.
Yeah.
And so, while a deal may get done before the Soto deal happens, they're going to be related.
Yeah.
And so I think that all parties involved here, including Juan Soto, are doing what we expected, are doing what they should be doing. I just think that, I think what we said last week is it feels like that money that they would be offering Juan Soto, if an offer ever came, would be better spent on Teoscar Hernandez and then other pieces versus just a Juan Soto piece.
To be clear, that was your view, which you are well entitled to. Not my view. I'm a Juan Soto guy. I think the Dodgers should sign Juan Soto. I understand the conversations around Teoscar, but I think the point you make, which is, let's not read too much in the fact that the Dodgers met with Juan Soto, right? Like, am I hearing you right? Yes, they met with him, but that's expected. They're going to ask questions. They're going to hear where he's at. They're going to hear what he's interested in. Because if he comes to them and says, hey, you know what? I'm actually very interested in a 3-year huge money deal that's going to pay me $60 million a year for the next 3 years, and then I get to hit free agency again, who knows? That might change the calculus for the Dodgers on how interested or not interested they are going to be. And so just because, or he might say,
how interested I am.
Totally. Or he might say, hey, the starting point is 550 and don't come with anything less. And then the Dodgers have the information that they need to move on and say, we're in or we're not in with Teoscar Hernandez. I will say this about Teoscar. I do think the relationship with the Dodgers is in a healthy enough place. And I think he has the self-awareness to know, right? Like, it's not like the Dodgers are saying, hey, hold on. We need to see what Tyler O'Neill is going to do first, Teoscar Hernandez, then we'll circle back. I think Teoscar has the awareness to know, hey, that guy's going to be one of the greatest hitters of all time when he's done. So it's not an insult to me if a team says, hey, let's just pause a second and see how this one plays out. I think the relationship with the Dodgers is good enough that the Dodgers, if they were to miss out on Teoscar, I don't think they're going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, we had no idea that you were going to accept X deal. Like, I think the Dodgers are going to be consulted. They're going to be in the running. And the ultimate decision on whether or not Teoscar Hernandez is a Dodger, I actually think is going to rest with the Dodgers, because clearly, by all accounts, it's where Teoscar wants to be.
Yeah, I would think that they would take any offer that they fielded that Teoscar was willing to accept and bring it back to the Dodgers.
Totally.
And I don't think this turns into a Justin Turner situation where there's this bitterness on, with both sides. I think for the Dodgers, it's a situation where they would welcome that. And if they feel like they are not close on a Juan Soto, deal or even in that running, by their choice or by his, I do think that they would bring him back. And so, like you said, I think your point is a good one, that he's in such good standing with them that he would say, hey, you know what? I just got this offer from the Baltimore Orioles and I like it. I'm willing to take it, but I wanted to bring it here first because if you guys can match this, put the contract in front of me because I want to be a Dodger. Totally. But, he also has to do what's in his best interest. And, sometimes those two things don't align. So, that's sort of where I stand on it. And like you said, if by some craziness, the Soto contract ends up being, if they say, hey, I'll take 3 years for this outrageous AAV, that changes the calculus for a lot of things, because then I think the Dodgers can swim in those waters.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just ask straight up. If he says, hey, I'll do $55 million a year for 3 years, $165 million over 3 years, is that a contract you're more interested in than, the 13 years, $500 million or whatever?
In the unexpected world that happens in, yes.
Like, does that climb? Oh, because you've got right now Teoscar, give that money to Teoscar and pitch player B. Does 3 years at 55 to 60 million AAV eclipse give that money to Teoscar? Like, does that become option A in your book if that option's on the table?
It is. It does. It would become option A in my book. Because the quickness that they could get off of that contract, it's also it ends up being a very tradable contract if they ever need to. Yeah. But the longer than that, and obviously the more commitment than that, I think starts to get in the way. Because look, for as much money as the Dodgers have been willing to spend, they're still only on the books for Shohei for what they're on the books for. It's not for $70 million a season. And, it's more than the 2, but it's not 70.
It's 46. And the Dodgers would tell you in their calculus, they have it valued at even less than that. So
yeah,
for what it's worth.
So And so at some point, they are going to become wary of the taxes,
Yeah.
the Major League Baseball taxes. And if signing Juan Soto to anything more than that kind of deal keeps them from bringing in pitching that they need, or that kind of stuff, then I'm not for it. But if they were to do that, like a 3-year type of deal for whatever that might be, the 150, 160, something like that, I don't think that stops them from doing something else then.
Got it. Yeah. I was just trying to look. The Athletics got his projection. If he signs the 13-year deal, the AAV would be somewhere around $42 million a year. And that's cash, right? That's not deferred money, which I'm sure the Dodgers would be asking for. And I'm guessing Scott Boras would not be all that interested in. But it'll be interesting. Again, to everybody's point in the chat, they met. Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It might mean something. It might mean nothing. I'll put it that way. It might mean something because they met with him and only 5 teams have met with him, but it also might mean nothing. The Dodgers are going to be in on these conversations at all times. So that's the latest on Teoscar Hernández. That's the latest on Juan Soto. Let's get to a couple other sort of off the beaten path topics really quick, Anthony. The first one I want to just chat about briefly was the Mookie Betts podcast / YouTube show that came out. Mookie Betts, for those that don't know, has a deal with Bleacher Report where he's got a show on deck. I'm just blanking on the name as soon as I got here.
Yeah, I believe it's On Deck.
On Deck with Mookie Betts. And folks, all I'm going to say is this. If you have not seen this 50-minute show, like set yourself a time, give yourself an hour, watch it on 1.5 speed, whatever you got to do. It is unbelievable. There's 3 different groups of people that he sits with. It's recorded on the night of the parade. So, guys like Walker Buehler might have been, they might have had a few drinks more than the drink they're holding while they're recording this. But On Base with Mookie Betts. Thank you. Not On Deck. On Base with Mookie Betts. Thank you for the correction, Chad. I apologize. It's like one of those things that as soon as I got to start saying it, I was like, not even positive what the next word is here. On Base with Mookie Betts. But some unbelievable stuff that came out of this. The Walker Buehler section, which is like the first part, he's on a couch with Daniel Hudson, Evan Phillips, Brent Honeywell, and then Mookie's asking questions. In and of itself is worth everything. A couple big headliners for me, Anthony, and then I'll let you share if there's anything that jumped out. The first one was he lied to Mark Pryor. So Walker Buehler tells the story. I'm going to give the PG version of what Walker Buehler says happened. He goes down to the bullpen in game 5. Mark Pryor says, "What the blank are you doing down there?" And they go back and forth. And Pryor basically says, have you even thrown? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. Which wasn't true. He definitely hadn't thrown, he reveals on this podcast. And then he basically says he starts throwing and he looks at the bullpen catcher and a couple of guys. And he's like, hey, how's it look? And they're like, crispy, I believe was the word.
He asked them if it looked crispy. And they said, sure, bud. Yeah.
Sure, bud. I love it. That and I have to say the second part, I put this on social media. I clipped it. He says, Mookie asks him, like, what are you thinking as you're heading out there? And he says, like, something along the lines of, I asked myself what 22 would do, and 22 would be out there. And I'm like, give him the lifetime contract. I don't care what he wants. Him and Kershaw forever. Unbelievable stuff in that one. But those were the 2 things from on the Buehler side, Anthony, that jumped out to me the most.
Yeah, I liked it. I think the fact, and then he told the guys in the bullpen, like, because they're like, what are you doing out here? And like, obviously someone's going to make a call and be like, hey, Walker's down here getting loose, or he's wanting to get, and so he tells them, like, I'm just here to say hi, man. Like, I'm just here to chill. Like, I want to watch the rest of the game here, basically.
Yeah.
And, it was funny because when, they asked him that if he threw, and he's like, yeah, I'm ready. And he hadn't thrown yet. And he said, when he picked up the ball and he started to throw it, I think his line was like, he felt like he was 3 pounds or something like that, which means for a baseball player, which it means like, it felt like he had nothing behind it.
Yeah.
And then I think, which is why he probably needed to ask the other guys, like, hey, how's this looking? And they're like, yeah, man, it looks pretty good. Like, it's live. And so, he's just like, hey, let's do this. I'm available now. And so that's a good story. That was a really good behind the scenes sort of understanding of how that came about. And, I was really just sort of entertained by the entire, like, no, I'm going to go do this type of deal, because in the past, when it has been like a guy like Kershaw out there or something like that, yes, he's kind of like, voluntold that he's going to go do that.
Yeah.
And this sounded like, dude, there's no way we're going to you. And he forced their hand. And understanding what the bullpen situation was in that game, for him to have the stones to do that, and then for the Dodgers to go, you know what, this might be our best option. Let's do this. Like, credit to both sides there for recognizing what was going on.
I want to get to a couple super chats here. I have a bunch more from this show. But one other thing Buehler said that I thought was fascinating. Honeywell was like, tell him what you told me. And basically what Buehler had told him was, I was okay being the guy that loses this game if it goes that way. And kind of what he meant was, he said, I had been bleep all year. And he said, I deserved the upside. Like, I deserved this moment because of what I had been through and the work that I had put in. But he said he was also ready for the downside, i.e. people telling him he sucked. Like, he was kind of like, I want to be the guy that's out there. And if this goes sideways and somebody needs to get screamed at and yelled at and cussed at and crapped on, like, let it be me. Let it be me. I just thought that is like the summation. It was him in his own words explaining what I think I've tried to put into words about what I love about Walker Buehler. And it's that, like, he's okay. He understands the stakes and he still wants the ball because he can handle it. He can handle the highs and he can handle the lows, and he's okay with it. I just thought that was a great sort of quote line from him.
Yeah. After you and I were texting earlier today about, like, this being a topic for us, I was kind of thinking about it, and he's one of the most self-aware, like, publicly self-aware and honest players of this generation of Dodgers.
Yeah, 100%.
He'll tell you when he's good, and he doesn't sugarcoat it when he's been bad. And he was bad for a lot of the season. And he owned that every time. He owned it while it was happening in real time. And then, it was sort of why I think a lot of people got excited when he was like, during the, like, late in the year and then in the playoffs, when he was saying, it's starting to feel pretty good. Even that Padres start, that for a lot of it was not really his fault.
Yeah.
It would have helped if he could have got some swing and miss, but we don't need to relive that. But I think it was why, like, at least for me, I was like, okay, I think I can believe in this again, because he's saying it. And if you followed him, that self-awareness has been evident for a very long time for him. And so for him to make that kind of comment is interesting. I think what was also interesting, and they didn't really talk about it, was that the other risk there, besides like him being pooped on if he wasn't good in that situation, was it would have suppressed his market.
Well, and he might have been needed in Game 7 too. The other
I think then he does not pitch Game 7. If he does, he's sort of like an opener, I would think. And even if that's just an okay outing, he still gets all the meetings he's going to get anyway. But that market craters, I think, in terms of like the teams trying to play hardball with him more than they might, because they'd be like, look, man, you had a couple of good starts, and then but your ERA ended up being 7 during the postseason. Like, sure, you had a couple of good outings, but you still weren't great. And I think that he was able to do that, and now sort of the lore that comes with it changes that outlook for him.
Totally. Okay, let's get to a couple super chats. I have a few more things. Mr. John Rod 77. The best part is when he asked himself, what would 22 do? Yes, totally agree. Couldn't have been more on board with that moment. Rewound it like 5 times because I loved it so much. And it just goes to show, we've had conversations, like I know when Andy McCullough has been on the show, talking about the relationship between Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler and where it started versus where it is now. I think to hear the story of Kershaw coming up to Buehler in the clubhouse and saying, I love you, and then to hear Buehler basically ask the question out loud, what would Kershaw do? Kershaw would be in the bullpen. All right, down to the bullpen we go, is great stuff. Jonathan, going back to our manager of the year. Sorry, I missed this one earlier, Jonathan. As we were joking about the award itself, he points out that Buck Showalter was the 2022 National League Manager of the Year. He was fired a year later from the New York Mets. So if you want to talk about some credibility there, 2022, he wins Manager of the Year. It's his 4th award. So I guess, kudos to Buck Showalter. And then Richard, famously anti-Juan Soto. God forbid if Soto becomes a Dodger, Soto will be forever known as a player that stood in the way of bringing back Teo. Soto is about money, period. That's fair. Look, I understand the people that aren't huge fans of spending all that money on Juan Soto. I will disagree with anybody who says that he's not one of the greatest hitters in Major League Baseball. I will push back on people who think he's a clubhouse cancer, because I don't think there's any show me proof that he's a clubhouse cancer, and I'm all ears to listening to that. I don't think there is any. I think it's just a perception, and if you don't like his dancing in the box, that's fine, but that's a different conversation than he's a clubhouse cancer. But if you don't want to spend $500+ million on him, totally fair, totally valid. And I get it. So a couple more things I want to get to on that Mookie Betts interview. Walker Buehler has this moment, and nobody knows exactly what he said because of the way the camera was positioned, and he wasn't holding a microphone. But they had this moment talking about Dylan Cease coming back on short rest, and Walker Buehler says something along the lines of not built for that. Some people are, some people aren't. And then I think it's Daniel Hudson who just kind of laughs and goes, you said it. And they're all laughing about it. I think, and I agree with people who have pointed this out, that this is first and foremost a dig at Max Scherzer, I think, because Max Scherzer famously, as a Dodger, would not take the ball. And yet, I also think he is commenting on Dylan Cease, who struggled and probably was talking a little crap there. So I thought that was a great moment. And as every Dodger fans know, Anthony, Max Scherzer, not a popular guy. And Buehler took the ball and ended up with a second Tommy John surgery because of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make that correlation.
You don't think he was talking Scherzer? I
don't think the Tommy John surgery was because he made that one start.
Got it.
Yeah, he could have been, that might have been a shot at Scherzer. It wasn't the first place my mind went, but like after I saw like a couple of people mention, I was like, that's possible. Okay.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some there was some red ass there with the Dodgers, I think, for a lot of the season when it came to the Padres.
Oh yeah, they talked about it.
And I think what you heard there too was some of that coming out. It had to have felt good for all of them to keep them down as that little brother.
Yeah.
And I think for that roster, they understand what they went through all season, and they understand that the Padres were just as talented as they were, but they were clearly not a better team.
Yeah.
And I think some of that frustration from the Dodger side is that like people didn't understand that again. And this kind of goes back to the Dave Roberts, conversation that we had a little bit earlier. But, I think that was also a shot, not just at the player himself, but at that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get our guy Scott Gearman in here, and then I'm going to share some of my other favorite moments from this interview. Scott, you hop in as soon as I'm done with this and tell me what you loved. Oh, there's the puppy right there.
Puppy.
Scott's got a puppy. Shout out to dogs. This is a dog-friendly show. If Blake were here, it would also be a cat-friendly show, but it's a dog-friendly show for now. Shout out. I told Scott
my puppy. Maggie real quick. I'm going to hand her off.
There you go. Hi, Maggie. Welcome to a good home. Some other things I loved. Mookie Betts just openly saying I sucked last year, and basically my goal was to just be okay, because then the rest, as long as he was okay, the rest of the guys would carry it. Muncy and Mookie talked a lot about the Padres, basically saying that it was like everyone took a deep breath once they beat them. They were the best team, hardest atmosphere, that kind of thing. Muncy had a shot at Anthony Rizzo at one point. That boy Rizzo was too busy thinking about mound visits. It was a great moment. Just a great line. I'm here for all of the, like, we're just like 4 beers deep and we're just going to start saying things that we probably wouldn't if we had chosen. The last one, and I know, Scott, you pointed this one out to me before I watched it, but Chris Taylor saying they bleeped down their leg in the 5th. All we needed to do was put the ball in play. Just a great, in the 5th inning of Game 5 against the Yankees. Just great stuff. And then, of course, Max and Mookie talking at the end about just how close this team was and basically saying it didn't feel like they were going to work. Max said it's the closest team he's ever been a part of. Scott, I just listed a bunch. We talked Walker Buehler a minute ago, just before you came on. Give me just your overall reaction to the whole Mookie Betts on base with Mookie experience.
I thought that it was one of the best pieces of a player-driven podcast piece of journalism that we have seen, right? And just some unfiltered stuff there. I love that it was just off the cuff, just say whatever you want. Like, get those reactions there, go moment to moment. And I love that. I love that they went around. Mookie Betts is a natural at what he's doing. And I love that he was just bringing different guys in, asking them their accounts of this. And it's a lot of the stuff that we could see, but I was really happy that like they could feel it. And I texted in, I was texting Matt and I was like, when that inning was that fifth inning in the World Series was happening, they knew they were going to win. They didn't matter if the Yankees took a lead. They said they were going to win that game. And then and I love that Chris Taylor, Mookie tosses it to CT and he asks him about it. And then he talks about the Yankees, crapping down their leg. Because Chris Taylor's been on the end of one, like a big gaffe in the World Series before. I think it was game 4 of the 2020 World Series.
Yeah, I forget the game, but drop the fly ball.
Overruns the ball there. So he's had a moment like that. And I'm not saying like guys see that stuff, but when you get that sense, you see some funny stuff going on there. And that just that extra opportunity, that 6 outs right there, they just all knew. And you could tell these guys, we talked about camaraderie, Anthony, Jeff, like on all of our shows, we could see it. It was special stuff. And the way these guys talk about each other, the way they root each other on, no matter what the role is, yeah, man, it was awesome.
Yeah, it felt like for the first time in a while, it wasn't a bunch of mercenaries.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have that Juan Soto trade that happened, right? Like they didn't have the Max Scherzer or the Trey Turner or the Manny Machado or, any of that kind of stuff. But, anybody who's played team sports at like, you didn't even have to play it at like a high level, either junior high or, freshman ball or basketball or volleyball, whatever sport, any team sport, I think you understand that feeling that Chris Taylor was talking about.
Yeah.
Because what it is you're in the dugout, you're on the sideline, you are wherever you are in whatever sport you're playing, and your team is talking to each other and going, this is all we have to do. They're going to give it up. This is all we have to do. And you're pumping each other up. And it's not even like, okay, next guy has to hit a homer. It's not even like that. It's just like, do your job. That's it. And we will win.
Yeah.
And it happens in every sport, and it happens at just about every level. Like you could be like little league teams do this, right? Like, and so it was interesting to hear them talk like that because one, it felt like they were talking like they were just a bunch of amateurs like we are. Like it happens in slow pitch softball. Like, it really does. And so, and it was like, that was a real moment for me where it was like, man, these guys interact the way like I interact with my friends on these teams or, whatever. And it was so like, it brought a smile to my face because these are the multi-million-dollar guys. And they're like, in that moment, acting like we are in that, dude, we got this. Just do next guy, just do your job. They're going to cough this thing up. We got it. We're going to win the World Series. Like, in that attitude, it was so cool to hear them talk about it. And it was so genuine. And like you said, stuff they probably don't, one, they don't probably say it to a regular reporter. And two, they probably don't say if they're not, a case in or something like that, or a bottle in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couple
Go for it, Scott.
Special moments that I picked up that, subtle things that will 100% get lost in the mix. It's like when Freddie was going through his stuff there, talking about how routine oriented he is. And sure, a lot of ball players are like that. And he goes, hitting 3 times prior to every game. And he's out here taking 15 swings. And then he had a moment that clicked and he's like, I got my swing. And then everybody knew what he was talking about in that. And another one that I loved.
And his breakdown real quick, his breakdown of his at bat with Garrett Cole was terrific. So good.
Yeah,
he said baseball, and he explains it so well, where he's basically like, I fouled off the best pitch that he could have possibly made, and he lost. And I knew I had him beat. It's like so damn good. So I don't mean to cut you off, but that part, I freaking loved it, Scott.
That was great. Yeah, he's like, I fouled off the changeup, and he's like, I knew I had him. Yeah, and everybody knew when Freddie, he goes, I found my swing. Everybody knew what that meant. But another one is when Mookie was talking to Tommy Edman. And he was saying, I didn't know much about you, Tommy. I know you came over, you were hurt, I was hurt. But what we were both doing, Tommy said, he's like, Mookie, you helped me out with my swing. You helped me find some things out with my swing that I carried through the rest of the season. That's the special stuff that we do not hear about unless asked. Like, and that was one of those things I picked up on immediately. And I'm like, these guys are working. They're connecting with each other and they're doing stuff. They're working as a unit. They're not being too macho to, stay in their routines. They're willing to take the advice. Like Mookie Betts, they've been playing against Tommy Edman for years. Tommy Edman's been saying he hated playing against the Dodgers. Now they're on the same team. Now they can share these tips. And Tommy Edman does what he does.
It was pretty clear to us all summer long that this was a different kind of group, and it was a group that you could like just feel the connection, and to hear them talk about it in this way, like you say, you know, the Mookie and Edmund friendship and bond that they formed, like all of that, and he wasn't even there the whole season, right? But like all of that stuff is just, it solidified everything that we could see and feel throughout the course of the season.
Yeah. Also, last one of my favorite moments was when Mookie Betts is talking, I believe it's to Evan Phillips, and it was one of the bullpen games, and Evan Phillips was basically like, I was prepared to get 7 outs, but then I think Gavin Lux hits a home run and extends it, and Mookie basically looks at Brent Honeywell, he's like, buddy, we can't wait till you get in games. Like, he's like, we're trying to get you the ball, because if you're in the game, it means we're up by 5 or 6, and everyone just dies laughing. It's like, again, kudos to Brent Honeywell. He knows who he is. He knows where he stands in the pecking order.
And that guy deserves his ring.
Totally. Yeah. And at the same time, he's going back and forth with Walker Buehler, and he's kind of like, hey, tell him what you said to me, Walker. You know, like, and then he can sit with Mookie, who's basically like, yo, we can't wait till you get in the game. Amazing stuff. So again, we've basically given you the play-by-play of the whole 50 minutes. I promise you,
go watch
the World Series through this. It's worth your time. One other thing I want to get to, guys, before we do some questions real quick, is just talk a little bit about Baseball Hall of Fame. Normally, this isn't a topic to me that's of that much interest. There are a handful of former Dodgers, some fun names to go through the list and talk about. The headliners, Manny Ramirez, Hanley Ramirez, Russell Martin, Chase Utley. The full list, Bobby Abreu, 2012 Dodger, in case you forgot. How could you forget the 92 games that Bobby Abreu gave this franchise? Just kidding. Curtis Granderson, how about 36 games hitting a .161 in 2017? Hall of Fame ballot. Russell Martin, I mean, kind of a dog, 5.6 WAR in 2007, had some moments. I called him Russell left on base Martin because it felt like he always left dudes on base, but good career for him. Came back in 2019. Hanley Ramirez, let me throw this at you. 10.2 WAR in 276 games, a weighted runs created plus of 158. In 2013, he played 86 games, had 20 home runs, and an OPS over 1,000. For context, his weighted runs created plus in 2013 was higher than Ohtani's was this year.
He was incredible.
He was incredible. That's why he gets a spot on the legends, Manny Ramirez, Hanley Ramirez, and then Yasiel Puig. Manny Ramirez, though, 2008. How's this? 53 games, 17 home runs. Do the math on that. 53 games, 17 home runs. He hit .396, an on-base percentage of .489, a slug of .743, and a weighted runs created plus of 210. That's basically Aaron Judge numbers for Manny Ramirez. Some other guys, Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley. And then I just want to mention Andrew Jones, who I hope never gets in. I don't wish bad on anybody. I hope Andrew Jones never makes it into the Hall of Fame. In 2008, 238 at-bats. He hit 3 home runs in a half of a season. 3 home runs with a 158 batting average, a 32% strikeout rate, and a 38 weighted runs created plus. Let me give you some context. 38%. There are 2 players in all of Major League Baseball this season that had 200 or more plate appearances and a weighted runs created plus lower than Andrew Jones did in 2008. Tim Anderson and Brandon Drury. You want to hear some guys who had a higher weighted runs created plus than Andrew Jones? Javi Baez. Javi Baez, 1 spot ahead of him. Miguel Vargas, Kevin Kiermaier, all these guys ahead of him. And oh, by the way, he did that while making $18.1 million. It was the 5th highest average annual value contract in Major League Baseball at the time. Anthony, that's my rant. I hope Andrew Jones never gets in. You know, most of these guys probably never will, but Andrew Jones, I hope you have a great life. You've made tons of money. What you did in 2008, you never deserve to make the Hall of Fame.
That was like my Jeff
McNeil guys' case based on what they did as Dodgers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, these guys, Manny Ramirez, fine, steroids. The rest of these guys probably don't belong anywhere near. Andrew Jones, like, legitimately might make the Hall of Fame. It makes me so mad. I understand what he did, all the rest. Okay, I understand. I loved Andrew Jones as a Brave. Loved the guy. What he did in 1 season as a Dodger. He was the 5th highest paid player in baseball, and he was so bad that they cut him after half a season.
He was hanging out.
That should disqualify you. That's if steroids disqualifies you, this is worse than steroids. I wish he would have taken steroids. I wish he would have taken steroids rather than do what he did in 2008. That's what I got. Okay, one other fun one. This is a good one. Okay, non-Dodgers.
Jeff, the Dodgers won the World Series in 2024.
What's that?
The Dodgers won the World Series in 2024.
That's true. Good news. Good news. Okay, this one is interesting. CC Sabathia. It's not a Dodger, but I thought this quote from Jason Stark in The Athletic was fantastic. Perfect summation of CC Sabathia. He said, if you close your eyes and don't spend any time looking at a baseball reference page, Sabathia feels like a Hall of Famer. He walks and talks like a Hall of Famer. He definitely has the spectacular highlight reel of a Hall of Famer. But does he have the actual numbers of a Hall of Famer? He goes on to add he has 250 wins and 3,000 strikeouts, one of only 3 lefties to do that. He also has a 3.74 career ERA, which would be the highest by any left-handed starting pitcher in the Hall of Fame and the 3rd highest overall. I found that fascinating, Anthony. We can spend 30 seconds on this because he's not a Dodger. In my mind, CC Sabathia is a Hall of Famer, but when I look at the numbers, I didn't realize his ERA was that bad.
Yeah, he's an interesting case because his peak was not very short. It was shorter, I think, than some of the other guys who are, sort of the no-brainers, like a Clayton Kershaw. His CC Sabathia's peak was far shorter than his. But he has like really iconic moments.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I think that helps his narrative. But yeah, if you dig deep into the numbers, I mean, you don't even have to dig that deep. They're not great. But here's my thing about this and why I have such an issue with the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame is because it is so rigid in every era of voting block.
Yeah.
On what they will only consider. And I think it does a disservice to the actual Hall of Fame. The actual, you walk into those doors and what you experience. I think it keeps experiences out. Like CC Sabathia's run, I'm a little partial to this one because I was the beat writer at the paper of record for this team when this happened. But when he got there in 2008 to Milwaukee, and he grabbed that team by the collar, he did this. He grabbed that team by the collar and he dragged them into their first playoff appearance in 2008 since 1981.
He did everything.
What it did to that city and to that franchise and what it made that ownership group realize, and then they started to dish out the money as a smaller market organization and said, you know what, we want to, not just that window, but like now still, like, I mean, declining that option on Devin Williams is stupid, but like they were willing to spend the money to continue to be good. And since that time, and I think when you think about all those things, and then him winning the World Series with the Yankees, when you think about all those things and how dominant he actually really was when he was with the Cleveland Indians, I think that stuff needs to start to matter a little more in the vote than just the raw numbers. Because you know who is a perfect example of this? Fernando Valenzuela.
Yeah. Yeah. 5 top 5 Cy Young Award finishes for CC Sabathia. He won it in 2007 with Cleveland, as you mentioned. He pitched 19 years. So crazy stuff. Scott, any thoughts on Sabathia? Again, I know it's not a Dodger specific. I just think when you talk about the Hall of Fame, he's such a fascinating guy because I agree with Stark that in my head, he's a Hall of Famer, but I understand that people are saying he'd have the worst ERA of any left-handed starting pitcher in the Hall of Fame if he made it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Ant. I think that like the war, everybody looks at, war leaders, and then you get into that and then it gets dicey. It's, he did this and it's this career war numbers that I think that I've been to the Hall of Fame. To what Ant said, I resonate a lot with that there's players that have moments of history. There's guys who overwhelm with the numbers. But there's guys that, like Fernando Valenzuela, that have such a cultural, like an impact in their own way. They have just that splash that just matters so much for the game. And that's important. And also it backs up with the performance. Like it's a Hall of Very Good, but what'd you do, when you were out there? You were dominant, you were electric, you meant so much to a city, to, growing the game. And like with Fernando, it's a no-brainer for me. I know some people disagree with stuff like that, but with Fernando, like it's I know what he meant to baseball. CC Sabathia, the longevity there, what he meant to the Brewers, what he did when he went to the Yankees there, pitching in so many like postseason games. There's guys who have special cases, and it's, if you have to isolate it, if you peel back the names and you just look at the numbers, that's a different whole conversation. But if you have to look at the careers and the roller coaster that it is, and the moments that they had specifically, that's when I guess it just gets easy when you just look at the numbers. And putting somebody in a Major League Baseball Hall of Fame or, among the greats all time, you have to look at things individually. It's not just a numbers-based thing. It really is not.
One funny story about the Baseball Hall of Fame, because I just remembered this. We did our live show the night that the Dodgers won the World Series. And after that was finished, I took off because I was going to celebrate with a few of my friends, and we went to the crappiest bar in town because it was the only one that was still open at 10:30 p.m. on whatever that was, a Wednesday night. And one of my buddies hates this place because of the, let's just say, the clientele that frequent such places that are open till midnight. And the perfectly on cue for this guy, a dude wanders over to us who's, 4 beers deep or whatever, and by himself and just in the mood for talking to some people. And guess what he starts talking to us about? The Baseball Hall of Fame, telling us how amazing he thinks the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And he just first he tells us how expensive beer is in Cooperstown. But he says, all you got to do is just grab a 6-pack, put it in a brown bag. Nobody checks the bag. Nobody checks the bag. Don't even worry about it. And then he just kept saying to us, you got to look up. You got to look up. When you're in the Hall of Fame, you got to look up. There's stuff up above you. You got to look up. It was amazing. It was like an 18-minute conversation that would just never end. So I have not been to Cooperstown, but my friend at Boston's pub down the street has been to Cooperstown, and he says it's a great experience. Real quick on this. I mean, Dodgers that will be in the Hall of Fame, we're probably looking at a team with Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Clayton Kershaw, Dave Roberts. Those guys, those 5, some of those guys don't, maybe a lock. I mean, Clayton Kershaw's a lock. Shohei Ohtani, a lot would have to go sideways. But I mean, that's 5 Hall of Famers on the Dodgers roster that we just watched, Scott, which is a pretty freaking crazy number.
Yeah. No, I mean, I got a couple buddies that joke like Freddie gets 2 more with the Dodgers, then you're going to see that Hall of Fame plaque change. Yeah. To the Dodgers.
It's gonna be like Back to the Future, where just like sort of
something happens, morphs a certain way. But Freddie's a Braves Hall of Famer until barring anything crazy. Let's just keep it at that. But this is a moment. Just Jeff, we've echoed this, Anthony. We've all echoed this on this channel. Absorb every piece of media, read everything, understand everything. Remember this team. It's just one of the most special groups you're going to be a part of. Hall of Famers that all displayed why they're Hall of Famers, why they're the top talents in the league. They were, displaying it on the field, bleeding that talent off to the rest of the guys on the roster, and being very vocal about it. And it's a special thing. And I hope this doesn't get lost, because 10 years down the road, Jeff, I'm going to remember they won a World Series, but I'm glad they're talking about it a ton, because it just makes it that much more special.
This is going to be an interesting show in 7 years or so, when Clayton Kershaw is not a first ballot unanimous decision.
He's going to be. I will be. My computer might not work that day if that's the case. I might be making a trip somewhere. Protest.
I'm prepared for that to happen.
Somebody, because of playoff
never ceases to disappoint, and I have no doubt that the playoff narrative is going to creep into at least one voter, and he's going to go, not on the first ballot. I'll vote for him next year.
Yeah.
What's the number of guys that have gotten in unanimously? Like Jeter. Oh, Jeter's the famous one who didn't get in unanimously. He got 3. I'm looking it up right now. It looks like Rivera is the only guy who is 100%. So Derek Jeter got 396 out of 397. Ken Griffey got 437 out of 440. 3 people didn't vote for Ken Griffey Jr.
You see what I mean? Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, Kershaw's not going to do it. It's not going to happen for him. He'll get in first ballot, but he's not going to be unanimous. It's stupid.
He's writers, man.
300 GJW with the super chat. He said, this is the first year since 2017 that this team really faced adversity that really bonds the team. I can see us rolling off a few more World Series with this group. That's what Mookie said, right? He needs at least 2 more to fill out his hand. So he's got that going. But I mean, you look at the roster, and we just talked earlier about the Phillies and bringing back a whole team and expectations and all of that. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that the Dodgers might be better next year with guys coming back from injury, depending on what they do in free agency. Like, if they go add one of these, if Teoscar comes back, they add a starting pitcher and get healthy all at the same time. Like, some of the young guys are a year older. Tommy Edmonds here for a full season. Michael Kopech's here for a full season. I mean, those guys are basically free agent additions that this team is adding. So 300 GJW, we appreciate the super chat there. Let's get to some questions. I know we're past the hour mark. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes worth of questions, myself, Anthony, and Scott, as we do. Thank you to everybody, nearly 2,000 people on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, joining us. Just a reminder, by the way, if you are not already following the Dodger Blue 1958 account on social media, whether that's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, go ahead and do that as soon as we are done here. We've got some giveaways coming up with our friends at Homage, HOMAGE. There's a link in the description down below. They've got awesome stuff, super comfortable, awesome designs. Their World Series stuff just released about a week ago. So go check them out and make sure you're following the Dodger Blue page, because we're going to have some giveaways with them for some of our social media folks as well. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and throw those in the chat. While we're waiting for that, I mean, Scott, the premise that was just presented, that this group might have a few more World Series in them. Yes, getting to a World Series, winning a World Series is very hard. Making it through a postseason run is not always the result for for even the best team in Major League Baseball. They've got some guys who, you know, in Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, these are guys that, like, I would still say haven't quite exited their prime yet, but if they haven't yet, they might be in the next couple of years. How realistically, what are you sort of projecting forward for the group that the Dodgers have under contract for the next few years?
A lot of the same. And I think a lot of this confidence clicked for them. And will back me up on this, that you could see about mid-year that the gap between the American League and the National League was so far and away skewed towards the National League in terms of, you could tell. I mean, we knew, Jeff, on here talking midseason, that whoever wins the World Series, it's going through the National League. Yep. You could tell the power of the teams that had it put together were in the National League. And I think with the Dodgers, you know, getting that boogeyman, I've said that a bunch about the Padres, and them being able to do that unlocked a certain grip of confidence that I think they lost for some time. Like, they hadn't put that together. They hadn't won a ring. They've been stymied in the first or the second round right away since 2020. And when you do that, you put a formula together, and you, just to what Kike said, you visualize it. You can see it in how the success, and if they push the right buttons when it matters, it's about execution. And they did it, and they made it happen, and they pushed all the right buttons all the way to it. So I expect this continued success. You know, the baseball is going to fall how it does, and that's ball. That's the easy opt-out or cop-out for what we, when we watch this game. But I think these guys, Muncy, Mookie, Ohtani, Freddie, and I want him to go off this, but I think they understand what this group can do when they all play together. They all know each other. That time they spent together made them a group that's why I keep saying, Soto's plan zero, and you've got to explore it. But at the end of the day, I want to see this group be able to run it back. And that's my kind of my main thing there. I got to see it.
Yeah. And that's the good news is basically all these guys other than Teoscar and Walker Buehler are locks to come back next year. And those guys, I would say, are likely to come back in both cases.
Yeah. I think the front office here deserves some credit, because they've tried to build this kind of culture for several years now. Yeah. And, we've talked about it before, and there have been some deals that haven't gone through, or, why'd you bring that guy back? And he's terrible now, and you should DFA him. Oh, you're right. We've had all those talks, but I think all of it goes into this mix of they've really tried to create something beyond just the talent. And we have seen it in the past, and we've seen that it's been there. It just hasn't always resulted in the outcome that we want. This year it did. And I think you could see there was a clear, there wasn't just a gap in the National League versus the American League. There was a gap in terms of the closeness and the fabric of other Dodger teams in the recent past and this one. Guys like Teoscar Hernández and Kike Hernandez setting the tone in that dugout and in that clubhouse, and then the leaders like Clayton Kershaw and Mookie Betts and those types. The whole thing with Shohei Ohtani early in the spring, and it ended up being sort of a bit of a blessing where it brought him closer to his teammates. All of that kind of stuff, right? And so how many more does this team have in them? I think part of that is going to be answered by sort of this monkey off the back kind of mentality. We don't have to press every time we step into the box and create sawdust with the baseball bat. Also, you know what? We now remember that the Padres are not as good as we are.
Yeah.
We are still the better team. I think that they reminded themselves of that. And that, for all the guns that are pointed at them all season long by every team in the league, they're still the best team. And all of that, and plus, I mean, a second year with this kind of injury propensity is like, would be absurd and absolutely unheard of. So if they have a little bit better health too, they have the best chance to run it back of any World Series champion, I would say, like in the last 30 years.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Let's get to some of these questions. Again, thanks to everybody joining us. Obviously, I'm just going to pick Scott or Anthony to each of these so we can try and get through as many people's questions as possible. We'll start with Jonathan. Jonathan says, Scott, question, do the Dodgers go with the 6-man rotation? If so, what does this mean for Danny Duffy when he finishes his rehab? He's got to be close, right? Great joke, Jonathan. No notes on the Danny Duffy commentary. We're always here for those. But the Dodgers have denied it all of this season, Scott. But with Ohtani coming back, A, are they going to go with the 6-man rotation? And B, are they going to admit that they're going with the 6-man rotation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's already been said with the number of guys like, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Ohtani, Tyler Glasnow, having, and even go further. Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, all that, Bobby Miller, like guys who it would benefit them to be spread out a little bit more. Working on this extra rest would benefit them. If it pushes their workload towards the back end of the year, that extra time, it's going to matter. It just does nothing but benefit the group of guys that they have. Yes, there's some that are walking a fine line of, if they get pressed too hard, they might succumb to some injury here. They're still working on that ramp up. If these arms can get into that routine to have that extra day, it's going to do nothing but benefit them. If they're comfortable doing it, which I believe that Ohtani, Yamamoto, Glasnow, I'm sure could get in that rhythm there, but it's just, they have to start being careful. We saw what happened now when you have 3 guys who can pitch and you can kind of be their workhorses here. Barring, Walker Buehler coming back, same type of thing. Like he's someone who could, you need to wedge him into a start. You could do it. But again, I think that, Jonathan, to your question, that I believe, yes, they're going to go ahead with a 6-man rotation. It'll do nothing but benefit them.
Yep, totally agree. Anthony, Tim wants to know, do the Dodgers need to sign a lower cost innings eater type guy, i.e. Paxton last year, in addition to a front end starter? What do you think?
I don't think so. Now it depends on the health of other guys. Like, is Glasnow back? Like that, it depends on that type of stuff. Yeah. We know Stone's gone, but like maybe we've said this before. 1 or 2 of those guys might already be on the roster.
Yeah.
And given the guys that they have coming back, given the guys that they could re-sign, I think if they just do that and they have some just relatively okay health in that rotation and amongst that group of starting pitchers, I think they have that innings eater type, but maybe between a couple of guys that can give them, 32 starts, 33 starts between 2 people. I think that's totally fine. If Glasnow is look, regardless of Glasnow, I would like to see them sign that frontline starter. Sasaki is my hope. But like, again, even if they just kind of bring back the band for the most part and guys stay, again, relatively healthy. I'm not even asking for 28 to 30 starts from all these guys, just relatively healthy, more healthy than they were in 2024. Yeah. I think they still have I think it's arguable that they're the best rotation in the league if those guys are in it.
Yeah. I think your point about they may already have it. I mean, look at a guy like Bobby Miller. Bobby Miller was not very good last season, but from a health perspective has been pretty durable and like is probably a better option than anybody that you're going to get as a quote unquote lower cost kind of a guy. Speaking of Sasaki, Laura wants to know, any traction on Sasaki? Are the Dodgers still favored or not? I stand by my nobody knows anything stance on Sasaki. There have been reports saying he's best friends with Yu Darvish, and that's why he's coming over and he's going to be a Padre. There are reports that the Dodgers are the reason that he posted early because of workings with his marketing team. There are reports that he wants to go to a small market team. There are reports of all sorts of stuff. So all we know is that he's not going to be posted in 2024. He will likely be posted. He will be posted after December 2nd, before December 15th, which will make him eligible to sign in 2025, which is when people are expecting him to sign. And then it's a free-for-all. So we won't have a ton of information on this, at least for a few more weeks and potentially for, another month and a half. because he likely will not be signing anything until the middle of January. Some more questions here. Scott, I'll ask this one to you. GI wants to know some projections have Willy Adames signing for over $200 million. Are you still interested at that number?
GI, if that's out there, look, I'm going to say that, 200 is a lot. I'll say if it goes over 200, I don't want to do it. It's just the reason why I'm just going to harp on shortstop. After this, there are not many, and I don't see Gunnar Henderson reaching free agency, and that's the next one. That's the next guy. So if the Dodgers just go ahead and re-up Tommy Edman to a multi-year contract this offseason, they just go ahead and do it, then, and you want to just slot him in and you're able to shift him between shortstop and center field, however they want to work it, I'm fine. I'm totally good with it because that's not kicking the can at that point. He's a viable option for sure, but 200 is just way too much. I'm good. The early projections I saw, like Spotrac had him at like 6 for 150, somewhere in that range, and I can live with that. That's something, because then it just opens up options elsewhere. But 200, I'm out. I'll just say that right here. And I know Blake's watching. He's going to text me furiously that I changed the plans, but 200 is way too much for me. That's a number I'm not. That's they getting into overpay territory, and the Dodgers aren't in a position where you have to do that. There's multiple different avenues here.
And offense is not the problem.
Yeah.
Scott, I'm going to make you squirm. I'm going to ask you a question that you're not going to be happy with me asking you. If Andrew Friedman came to you and he said, "Hey, Scott, here's the deal. We can give Tommy Edman an extension, or we can give Willy Adames a free agent contract, but we can't do both because we've got different plans for center field, and so we're just looking for a shortstop. What should we do, Scott? What would you tell them?"
Tommy Edman.
Okay.
Easy one. That's a pretty easy one. I understand
this extension's not going to be $150 million.
Not going to be $150 million. It's just about that. There's just nothing on the shortstop market, but I feel like they have Tommy Edman's a good enough option in-house where you could do it. I need that money to go again. Matt brought it up. You have to look for the impact. You have to do it. Bringing the band back together is great, but you got to find a way to you're losing some pieces. You need to use that money elsewhere to find that impact piece. And Tommy Edman is good enough. Like we talked about, that his proficiency against left-handed pitching is what's going to make him his money, right? But what he's done incredibly, like he did against the Yankees and Tommy Kahnle, is in those righty-righty matchups, he made himself valuable because of the pitch in the arsenal, and he diagnoses that. And I think that for me just boosted him into another tier. It became he was a switch hitter, a guy who could be a switch hitter, but it was just more the platoon splits were weighted one way or the other. I think now he opened up a different part of his game. So I was already way in on Tommy Edman, but Jeff, that's a crazy thing to ask me right here. But yeah, you got me. Tommy Edman, do the extension because it's right up the Dodgers alley. And
totally.
It's the same thing. It's something that's like the CT3 role here now. It's just you struck gold. It's a generational trade.
I say this time and time again. There is value in having seen a guy in your clubhouse, in your stadium, in the biggest moment, and how he performs. Correct. There is no unknown with Tommy Edman anymore. He won NLCS MVP. We see how he fits in the clubhouse. And none of this is suggesting that Willy Adames would not fit in the clubhouse or that he would fail under pressure or any of it. I'm just saying we've seen enough times guys go somewhere and you're like, man, why did that not work out? I don't know. Enough to say if the guy is already in-house and you've already seen it work, then just stick with it. Let's get to a couple.
$200 million projection is just outrageous.
And I don't, again, that was what somebody suggested. I'm with Scott. I think the number that I've seen on The Athletic and MLB Trade Rumors, people that are really good at this, is closer to 6 years, 150, something like that.
And I think we talked about this last week, or maybe it was a show before. But like to me, that's outrageous. Also, I'm not giving that guy 150. I'm just not.
Yeah. And look, I don't, we've got, that's what I love about our crew. We've got differing opinions on Willy Adames. Blake would probably sign off on 200 million. Scott starts to get nervous once it gets above 150. Anthony's the hard no once it gets to 9 figures. And so there's a lot of, again, good stuff. Let's get to a couple more. I'll answer this one. XRP, is it too far-fetched that the Dodgers go get both Teo and Soto? Yes, it is. That would be, there'd be highlight blooper reels. They'd be making the old blooper videos strictly out of the Dodgers corner.
Oh man, I remember those.
Let me give you this last one, Anthony. Scooter Booter wants to know where do you stem for the Burnes train? Basically, I think it was John Morosi reported that the Dodgers and the Orioles were front runners for Corbin Burnes. What are your thoughts on Corbin Burnes and the fit? And again, the report that the Dodgers and Orioles are sort of co-front runners for Corbin Burnes.
I have a hard time seeing that on the Dodger side. It may be that that may be coming from an agent trying to jack stuff up.
Could be.
I really think that, and that's how some of this works. And I understand that, like, because I spent a career doing it too. Like, you get the information and you put it out. But given the Dodgers' track record and how they've handled pitching contracts, that would be a little surprising if they're still asking for like 6-7 years.
Yeah, 7 for 200, I believe, was the projection on The Athletic. I've said I really like Corbin Burnes. I understand some of the stuff is diminishing. I think he gives you the value of a guy who's made like 34 starts a year for the last 3 or 4 years in a row. And so there's value in that. Scott, are you a Corbin Burnes guy?
I am a Corbin Burnes guy, but I also understand and look at the red flags of each.
Totally.
And what we, Blake and I, we talked about it, and we said on our show, and it's that there's a ton of names, big time names that are very attractive names on the free agent market, but each of them come with their own red flag that actually would make you say, I don't want them. And that hasn't happened so much for a lot of these guys. Like in years past, it's like, you're willing to get over some of these things just because of just the potential. I think a lot of these pitchers, they're in their 30s right now. There's very few of them who
are all, I believe, at least going into their 30th age, 30 season.
And I co-sign a lot with you that there's immense value into just going out there and having bulk starts year after year after year and being that workhorse, just what you don't see very often now in Major League Baseball. So the value is there. Dodgers are probably interested just because they're interested in everybody trying to find that perfect contract that makes sense for them. But there's also it's just weighing the options and how long is that deal going to go? And you're going to push 200 million. You already have multiple guys on the roster with that. Glasnow is pushing mid-20s. Yamamoto has the richest contract for a starting pitcher in league history. So when you get into the weeds like that, are you willing to go ahead and hand another contract like that to Corbin Burnes? You need it. You need another guy. But are you going to get the number one contract on there again?
I also think that the game started number means a little less when you're a Dodger because of how they handle the rotation.
Even after 2020, even after the season we just had, though, I feel like that number means more than ever.
They're not letting him make 30 starts regardless if he's healthy or not. They're not going to let him.
But the fact is he's available. He's available for 30 starts.
Then look.
Coming off a season where every dude got hurt and they said they have to reevaluate the way that they identify pitchers and train pitchers and all that. Like, I just feel like if they went and got Jack Flaherty, I think in part because he was a guy they felt pretty confident was going to make every start. Yes, he was good, but they thought he was going to be durable.
No, and I understand that, but there's also a reason why Jack Flaherty probably isn't on the radar in the winter for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
because he might not be that good.
Well, yeah. And also but with Burnes, there's the immense back end pay, not money wise, like a cost wise, that you're going to endure later on in that deal. And if you're giving me 7 years of that dude versus 3 of like a Blake Snell,
Snell's probably 5. If we're going projections, it's 5 of Snell versus 7 of Corbin Burnes.
Well, we're talking projections here.
Excuse me, 4. Snell's projected to get 4, Fried 5, Corbin Burnes 7.
Yeah, and who knows? But last year Snell was also projected to get 6.
Yeah,
and he got 1. So
yeah, I'm just trying to use a baseline to compare. Because of course, if you say 2 years of Snell or 7 of Burnes, it's easy. But Snell is the oldest of the bunch. He's going to be 32 in a couple of weeks from today. So you're getting a guy who's 2 years older.
Yeah, and if you're talking to me about Corbin Burnes being 26 or 27, we could have that conversation. But going into his age 30 season, and so you're telling me that you're going to have to pay him, let's say something like, if it's an escalating contract, $50 million at age 36, that's a hard pass for me.
Yeah, he's projected to get somewhere in the 28 to 30 million AAV. And so if it is escalating, then maybe that's 35, 38. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and again, this is the price of doing business on the starting pitching market. To Scott's point, there's warts on all of these guys.
Yeah.
And you're going to take risk. Justin Lorber started the show talking about Rule 5 draft, and it's all a risk calculation. Like,
but the
do we
Dodgers,
want
the Dodgers
better
are the most
pitcher?
risky
Do we want a better pitcher
organization
with
in sports.
Say that again.
The Dodgers are one of the most risk-adverse organizations in professional sports.
See, I disagree entirely. I think they take on more risk than any other franchise in Major League Baseball.
To me, the only real risk has been Tyler Glasnow in several seasons.
Blake Trinan, Rich Hill, like
he's a reliever though, bro. He's
what?
like you can dust the reliever off your roster and you barely bat an eyelash at it. Glasnow is the only one, in my opinion. Like they're not signing Blake Trinan to like a game-changing contract.
Think about the guys they've drafted after getting Tommy John surgery. Think about the guys that they've Yamamoto, they handed the richest contract in Major League history. He'd never thrown a pitch in the United States.
Sure, and that was risky, but like everybody knew that he could handle his own. Like the money part of it isn't necessarily where the risk is for this organization. They print money.
No, sure. No, I agree. I don't think they care about losing money. Like thinking they're wasting money.
They care about losing time.
Yeah. We're probably.
But that's why they take a lot of these risks on guys with contracts. I know what Anthony's saying here. It's like that the risks they're taking are very seldom when it comes to big money guys. That's why they're not trading for like Nolan Arenado or players that are just, showing very shady and jaded production here. If they're taking risk with the arms, it's guys who are in, on arbitration contracts, pre-arbitration contracts coming out of college. You've got extensive team control here where you're willing to do that. Like Walker Buehler had 2 Tommy Johns. And he never got a big, anything but an arbitration salary here. So It's just, you have time with these guys. So that's why when you get into the weeds with these starting pitchers, they're going to take, if it's everybody you're taking a risk on. That's why Max Fried is like, has some of the biggest red flags. Blake Snell, the only thing, it's like 5 and dive, how much you get in there. Corbin Burnes has been a workhorse. So I understand why he's like one of the most attractive options, because he's just like Jeff said, he's been available a bunch. But my pause keeps coming in. Are you going to hand out another bit of the biggest contract to the front end starting pitcher? You might be, because that's the cost of doing business for starting pitcher right now. It's just how it is, honestly.
If you're going to do that, then I would rather do it for a guy like Sasaki than a guy like Burnes.
Sure. Yeah. And you got overwhelmed. Yeah. You roll the dice. You don't know.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, everybody agrees with you. There's not a single person in the world that would rather pay $200 million to Corbin Burnes than $5 million to Roki Sasaki for the same number of years. The issue is if you don't get Sasaki and you need a starting pitcher, now what? Do you trade half your farm system for Garrett Crochet? Do you shell out money for Blake Snell? Like these are the choices in front of you.
My question is, do they need that kind of guy?
Yeah, I think that's a fair. If you want to push back and say they don't need that type of guy, I think that's where the conversation exists. Let's get to one more super chat and then we'll be out of here. John asks, would the Dodgers most likely win the World Series in 2025 with Juan Soto in right field or Willy Adames at shortstop? Scott, I think he's asking which of these two would help their odds in winning the World Series in 2025 more. That's how I interpret it. So hopefully I'm not reading that wrong. But what do you think, Scott?
I got to say, Juan Soto. I don't think there's a question there. I don't think it's particularly close, John. I know it might not be the answer from what I said about Adames, but it's Juan Soto. It's getting another Hall of Fame production type player, and you still have guys like Tommy Edman in house. You can figure out the rest of it. I think everybody's neglecting how important trade deadlines can be. If you have issues at the deadline, you can go fill them there, but it would be Juan Soto, and it's not even close.
Yeah. Juan Soto is going to go down as one of the best hitters in Major League history when it's all said and done, what he's been able to do over the last few years. And John, if I'm misinterpreting the question, I think the Dodgers are probably the favorites to win the World Series today. They would only strengthen their position as the favorites by either signing Juan Soto or Willy Adames or Teoscar Hernández. Like I would say, as constructed with Teoscar gone, Buehler gone, all that, the Dodgers are still probably the World Series favorites as we sit here today. So any moves that they make on top of this, I think could just be icing on the cake for that one. So, hey everybody, we're at the 90-minute mark. Thank you so much for joining us on DodgerHeads Live. Shout out to Scott Gearman for popping in and joining us. Thank you to Anthony Witrado, as well as Justin Lorber, who hopped on at the beginning of the show to talk Rule 5 draft and the reliever that the Dodgers kind of surprised some folks, by protecting, as well as the guys that they chose not to protect in the meantime. As I mentioned, make sure you check out the stuff over at Homage. They're good friends of ours. You can check their link in the description below, and stay tuned on Dodger Blue 1958 on social media for all sorts of contests and opportunities to win some gear from them as well. Check out DodgerBlue.com. You find some great stuff by guys like Scott, Blake, Matt, and all sorts of other folks. We appreciate you joining us. That is Scott. That is Anthony. I am Jeff. Folks, enjoy the rest of your night. As always, go Dodgers.